I think it's interesting they got rid of the fact checker because the fact checker always turned out to be fact checking and stopping real speech that's protected under the First Amendment. So again, the proper place.
Absolutely insane.
First of all, you said you wanted to strike the language that's true, and you want to add in this other language. The proper place for this, as I've said again multiple times, is to put it in the minority views, which will be part of the oversight plan. But for some reason, that doesn't seem to be good enough for the minority.
Will the chairman yield?
Yeah, sure.
Just to pursue this point for a moment, this claim that this was fact-checking, wasn't this a suppression of New York Post reporting on the genuineness of the Hunter Biden laptop, which included the most incriminating evidence against a president involving family influence peddling that I think has ever been produced, and it turned out to be true. So what they were actually doing was suppressing facts, not checking them.
Suppressing facts and doing violation to the First Amendment and free speech rights of Americans. Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady, Ms. Crockett is recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. It's so interesting to me that we all swear an oath to the Constitution, and we say that we take that oath seriously. But when it comes into actually doing something that looks like preserving that oath or looks like preserving the Constitution, we get a little wobbly, and I'm not really understanding what's going on. Freedom of press doesn't look like kicking out the Washington Post, or actually the Huffington Post has been kicked out. We know that the Associated Press has been kicked out, and now the Washington Post is not going to allow for op-eds in any way if for some reason they criticize the sitting president of the United States. What this is starting to feel like is a smaller version of Russia. And I am trying to tell you that we are nothing like Russia. We are not supposed to be like Russia, but that is what we've got going on. And I'm sorry, I know that some of my colleagues still struggle with answering the question of who won the election in 2020. And you may have felt a way when you had social media checking people and saying, no, Trump did not win the election in 2020. That is absolutely factual. And unfortunately, because some people got all riled up because they believed the lies, they ended up getting locked up because they decided that they were going to believe the lies. They ended up at the Capitol on January 6th, and they were trying to tear this thing apart because they felt like their country was falling apart in front of their eyes because for whatever reason, there were people in power that were peddling a lie about the election. We also know, and some of y'all may still say that COVID was a hoax. COVID wasn't a hoax. Tell that to the over 1 million people that died under Donald Trump's first watch. It wasn't a hoax. So no, I do believe that it was okay. In fact, I do believe that it was ethically right for social media to check people because you had people that didn't know anything about science and decided that they were going to put out whatever lies or propaganda or conspiracy theories they wanted to, and people died. At some point in time, we have to evaluate what is factual, and I know that facts hurt y'all, and I just wish we could get on the same page, but we do know during the presidential election that the president would not go and participate in anything if fact-checking was going to be a part of it, because he didn't want to be fact-checked. We know that the vice president got upset in his vice presidential debate when he was fact-checked. It used to be a time in this country that we as members of Congress or elected officials thought that it was okay to just tell the truth. Instead, we're pushing conspiracy theories, and some of them are killing people. It's the same thing that we have coming out of Doge. It's the reason that people are dying. It's the reason that farmers are losing their farms, because we continue to peddle conspiracy theories. It is time for us to say, Mr. President, guess what? Russia invaded Ukraine. Can we at least agree on that one? Facts matter. Y'all, this is literally potentially putting us into an international crisis. We may be heading towards the next world war because we have a president that wants to pal around with Putin and wants to do everything to make him feel good, including lying about who invaded who. Mr. Chair, I got a minute left, but I really want to yield to any of my colleagues and ask them if they will say today, very basically, that when it came down to the war in Ukraine, that it was not Ukraine that invaded Russia, it was the other way around. Is there anybody in here that has enough courage to say that Russia invaded Ukraine?
You can have my time.
And this is yet the problem. This is the problem. That is not infringing upon free speech.
Will the gentlelady yield?
I will yield to the right.
Thank you, Ms. Crockett. To be clear, your challenge, I think, was across the aisle, because I think every member on your side of the aisle agrees with the obvious fact that Vladimir Putin ordered the filthy, bloody, imperialistic invasion of Ukraine. And in fact, at the time, Donald Trump as president never denied it. In fact, he praised it. He said it was, quote, an act of genius when Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine. So I would hope some of our colleagues would consent to at least that historical point, since we think history is so important. There are people who want to relive that in our oversight report.
And therein lies the problem.
The time of the gentlelady has expired. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I'd yield to the chairman.
I just wanted to make a point. We've talked, gentlelady, previous speaker talked about factual information. We've talked about fact-checking. Fact-checking, you know what fact-checking is truly supposed to be in this country? The First Amendment. Not some expert who can sit on and look at posts and tweets and different things and say, oh, that's not factual, take it down. That's not how it works. Fact-checking is the First Amendment. Someone says something stupid, and that happens every day in this Congress. Someone says something crazy. Someone says something that's not quite true, not quite accurate. You know what the fact check is? Someone says something else, and you have debate. That's what we do in this committee every day. And this is the committee who's supposed to protect that fundamental fact. Real fact checking is the First Amendment. Our Supreme Court has been clear about that. You don't like certain speech, the best speech for wrong speech is more speech. The best speech for false speech is true speech. That's how it works. You have a debate and you trust we, the people, to figure it out, not some expert who's going to fact check every tweet, every post. And we saw this in the Biden administration. We're seeing it in Europe now. We're seeing it in Brazil. That was the first bill we dealt with from the gentleman from California, his good legislation that we all agreed on. We're going to work on and put a good bill on the floor. So that's the key. That's what and we know it happened because, again, we had the guy who runs one of the biggest companies in the world, most successful tech companies in the world, tell us it happened. We had on the third day of the Biden administration an email from the White House to Twitter saying, take down this tweet ASAP. The government telling a business to take down a tweet, and the tweet, ironically, was from RFK Jr., who was going to be running for president against the guy in the White House. So he was saying, take down the speech of my opponent. That's not how it's supposed to work in this country. That's what we're concerned about. That's why it's in our oversight plan. And if you want additional things to look at, again, put them in your viewpoints. We're happy to accept them. We'll take everything Mr. Raskin has said today, everything the gentlelady from Texas has said today. We'll take everything the Democrats said. You want to put all that in your plan? Put it in your plan. That's fine. That's how it works. But no, that's not good enough. That's not good enough.
You know, it's interesting because I feel like I keep going back to elementary school and a lot of conversations that are taking place to basically educate people on the fact that we have three co-equal branches of government. And right now, when many of us say that we're in a constitutional crisis, it is because we feel as if the executive branch is being enriched of power that it should not be enriched in. And part of that consolidation of power is because, unfortunately, so many colleagues on the other side of the aisle seem to have pledged more loyalty to Trump than they did to the Constitution. But here it is, we're three co-equal branches of government. The last time I checked, we have an ethics that we are to be held to. We have a process, a due process, whenever there is a concern about our ethics in the House. There's a code of ethics that the Senate has to deal with. And so why it is, and the judiciary as a whole, it's the Supreme Court that is lacking. And here's the reality. The tables can turn any day. This is what I want you to imagine. Imagine that Planned Parenthood, I know how y'all love Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood says, you know what, Judge, let me come pick you up. So they pick you up on the Planned Parenthood plane. It's pink with Planned Parenthood all over it. And they take you on these fancy trips. And the next thing you know, there is a case that comes before the Supreme Court, and it has to do with whether or not a woman should not be a part of the Handmaid's Tale and should have a right to choose what she does with her body. But nevertheless, all of a sudden we see that there's this link between the justices that vote for this particular case and the justices that ended up on that Planned Parenthood plane. Now, I'm guessing if that happened that y'all would be in an uproar, but I could be wrong. And so what I'm trying to say is that what has been proposed is actually what we should be doing in this Congress. This isn't about politics. It shouldn't be about politics. It shouldn't be about party. It should be about what is right and wrong. That is what ethics is in the first place. Ethics is what's right and what's wrong. And so if we have to be beholden to ethics, and if every other branch of government has some kind of ethics, why is it that the highest court in the land would not have a level of ethics that they had to abide by to make sure that we could all trust the decisions that were coming out of our high court? These are decisions that literally change lives. Some people lose their lives. Some people lose their rights. Some people gain their rights. We should have trust in the system. And right now, people don't trust us because it's like we turn a blind eye when it's our side. This shouldn't be about our side. Ethics should be something that we all say, you know what, ethics are good. When we look at Elon Musk and we're talking about the fact that he has conflicts of interest, that would go to ethics. We should all have concerns about this. This is the only thing that Hank is trying to do with this amendment. And guess what? It wouldn't just apply to the Republican appointees. It would apply equally to the Democratic appointees as well. And I will yield to the ranker.
Thank you very much, Ms. Crockett, for those comments. And I want to pick up with where you left off when you said it shouldn't be a partisan thing. And, I was thinking about this terrible situation that we've got with Mayor Adams and the Department of Justice dismissing a grand jury indictment. Now, we could be taking the partisan instinctual position on our side of the aisle and say, wait, that's a Democratic mayor who's being charged with bribery and conspiracy and corruption charges. Don't talk about it. Just let this dirty deal go through. Let's be silent about the corrupt bargain. I've not heard a single Democrat say that. Not heard a single Democrat. And yet our colleagues are willing to be completely silent about this corrupt bargain, this dirty deal, because the Republicans are running the Department of Justice. But it's the Department of Justice, and we're the Judiciary Committee, and we're supposed to be standing up for the objective principles of the rule of law, as the gentlelady was saying. We've got the opportunity here with that because it's bipartisan corruption that's being fostered by a Republican president and DOJ and a Democratic mayor in those defending. We have the opportunity to clarify for the country that we stand up for the rule of law together. I yield my time to the gentlelady from Texas.
No, you know what? You always spark so many things in my mind. That's the professor in you for sure. But I will say that when I think back to law school, I think about the conversations that we had about Lady Justice being blind. And the one thing that I would challenge my colleagues to is I thought about what you said about George Santos, but I would say if you put these issues on paper and didn't put a name, didn't put a party, where would you stand? Because at the end of the day, I can guarantee you, if someone gave me $267,000 as the lies have been floating around that I somehow now have an extra $9 million lingering around and an extra 3, cribs, this is not factual, but this is on X, of course, because that's what they do is they put out lies in order to disparage people. But I'm saying if I somehow had an extra almost $300,000 and y'all found out that somebody, let's say George Soros, because y'all love to throw his name and stuff, George Soros gave me an extra $300,000, y'all would kick me out of Congress. That's just the bottom line. So my deal is, if you would kick me out of Congress for it, then you should take issue with it. So maybe what we should start doing is looking at the scenarios and removing the names and removing the political affiliation to determine whether or not there is an ethical issue. Because it shouldn't be an ethical issue if it's only one of us.
The time, gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
Thank you so much. And I am going to join my other colleagues and say simply thank you to the gentleman from California. Because earlier we had a conversation about facts. And the reality is that out of all your colleagues on that side, you are the only one that is courageous enough to actually say these are the facts. Whether you like what happened, hate what happened, agree that it should have happened, the facts are the facts. That's what happened. And so I appreciate you, because I think one of the things that we're getting frustrated about on this side is that there seems to be an attack on facts, so that when people put out fiction, that people will get drawn to that. So I appreciate you for not reimagining what happened as a beautiful day that was just a tour. But I will disagree with you to this extent. When you originally opened, you said that it wasn't an insurrection. And in my mind, I initially was like, it absolutely was an insurrection. And so if I read the definition from Google, it says a violent uprising against an authority or government. Call it what you like, but it fits the definition of an insurrection. And the other thing that I'll disagree with you about is you talked about having issue with the way that Joe Biden prosecuted them. I do want to clarify for the American people, if you are watching right now, that the President of the United States, at least historically how our presidents operated, the DOJ was separate, and you didn't have, attorneys that work for the DOJ saying that they are the president's attorney instead of the people's attorney, but that's where we are now. It wasn't the President of the United States that actually prosecuted anyone. It was his Department of Justice, I will say that. But I decided that I would go in because it seemed like you felt like there was a heavy hand for a lot of people. So literally, I just decided to look this up because I did not know the numbers. We've talked a lot about the fact that there's been 1,500 pardons, but we've never really kind of dug into the numbers. So January 6th of this year, there was an article that was put out that laid out, and this is from PBS, where it talks about kind of where the trials stood. So I'm assuming on January 20th, this number probably is still very much valid. There were 1,020 people that entered pleas of guilty. So regardless of what anybody thinks of the criminal justice system as somebody who did criminal defense, these defendants stood in front of a judge and said, yes, I am entering a plea of guilty. And they have to say voluntarily and freely before they can get through a plea. If a defendant ever says that it's not voluntary or it's not freely, then the judge rejects the plea. So that's number one. So 1,020 of them did that. There were approximately 250 defendants that went to trial, and it resulted in guilty pleas. They either went to a trial by jury or a trial by judge, but they were given an opportunity to decide if they wanted a jury trial or a trial by the court, and they went through their due process in that way. I will tell you that if I go back a little bit further, because I did not have the numbers from this article, if I go back just about 3 more months before this article came out, it said of all these pleas that we've heard of, 255 were for felonies. 255 out of 1,500 does not sound heavy-handed. That means the other people most likely entered pleas for misdemeanors. They only, when the people that still should be behind bars are the people that did what Eric talked about. The people that Enrique, whatever his name is, y'all know his name.
And will the gentlelady yield real quick? Quick question for you.
Okay.
In your experience as a lawyer, someone who defended people, what's a lawyer's obligation if someone says, no, I didn't really do this, I can't plead guilty?
We are not allowed to plea that person out. you can literally have your bar card snatched from you. It is unethical to enter a plea, and a defendant can get out of that plea if they say that they told us that they didn't do it and we told them to plea anyway. Then that could actually be our bar card. But the last thing that I was gonna say about Enrique is they let him out. He should still be behind bars, because then he went and he harassed our former officer, Fanone, just the other day, because he feels like he can do whatever he wants to, because he's now gonna be lawless like the rest of these 1,500 people. And when we talk about being safe in our communities, this is what we're talking about. We should not be letting criminals just roam the street after they've gone through the process.
Time of the
Thank you,
gentlelady.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate you.
Time of the gentlelady's expired. She yields back. The gentleman from, can we
Mayor,
claim?
talk on this, Chairman?
Mr. Massey, can you grab some time for us?
I'd like to yield my time to Mr. Fitzgerald.
I thank the gentleman. I mean, that's the point, though, that these individuals did go through the system. And some of them were found guilty, and they were incarcerated. And they spent days, months, years in jail. And then the president had the ability to pardon them. And we're kind of lost in a discussion about back and forth on J6 now, January 6th. But, you know, that was the point.